Where are we?
Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Tzadik Zion 97, but we are going to start at the two dots on Tzadik Vav Amabet 96b. We're going to be discussing a very interesting issue, which is if you have the leftover stuff from crushed grapes and you run water through it so as to effectively create additional grape juice, is that resulting juice. So you had, let's say you take all of the stuff, you put it on a strainer, all those remnants of the grapes, you put it on a strainer, and now you pour through it. Okay, that's going to be the major topic. And the question is sort of what's in the bottom, what pours into the cup that you have underneath it. Is that grape juice? Is that still water? And therefore, what blessing do you make on it? That's going to be the topic that we're going to be talking about. So let's go again, top two dots, Tzadik Vav Amabet, and let's take a look. So Tana Rabbanan, and of course, how did we get here? We got here because there was a question about spoilage of wine, and we will see a little bit more about spoilage over the course of today as well. And I can't help but think of the milk analogy, because we are going to see that sometimes, and we saw yesterday, that sometimes spoiled wine or wine that is in the process of spoiling will smell bad, will smell like vinegar before it tastes like vinegar. Now, if you have ever had a spoiled milk, or if you've ever smelled milk that was clearly on its way towards spoiling, you've probably actually experienced this, because the milk will smell like it's going before it actually tastes like it's going. So it is always good advice, especially if your milk is getting to the date. Of course, it's good to smell it, but if you can avoid smelling it.
Restaurant and they have the little tin with the milk.
Yes,
you always smell it before.
Oh, that's a very smart move. Exactly. All right. So now that we have all of that background, let's take a look in Tana Rabbanan. So Tana Rabbanan, rabbis taught in a brisa, Echad Shechar Tamarim doesn't make a difference whether it's beer date. Echad Shechar Tzorim doesn't make a difference whether it's barley beer. Echad Shimrei Yayin, or whether it's a product that is produced from the leftover pieces of grapes. So then, the blessing that you make over it is shahakol. It is not, as Rashbam explains, it is not going to be ha'etz for the dates, mizonos for the barley, and hagafin for the wine, but rather it's all going to be shahakol, because these are not sort of the way that we make it. This is very important. The Tosfos on this, hopefully you touched on it yesterday, but the Tosfos
no, he did not discuss.
So all right, so let's do, well, you know what, let's do the beginning of the Tosfos Echad Shechar Tamarim Mevarach Shahakol. It's the first of the widest lines. So Lav Davka Shechar Tamarim El Afil Dvash Tamarim. It doesn't make a difference whether you were thinking about some kind of date beer or date, or actually date honey. Mivarach alav shahakol. The blessing on it is shahakol niyebivro. My timer could amar beketz mivarachim, because following Maseches Brachos, which of course naturally is a place where you would look for halachot associated with brachot. Amar mar barav ashi hai duvsha detamre mivarach alav shahakol. So my timer zeya ba'almahu, that basically it is sort of like the sweat. It is the liquid that falls from something, and it is considered shahakol. And this is the reason that when we have orange juice and apple juice, etc., the blessing that we make on it is not ha'etz, but rather shahakol. V'hayotzim in haperos karizeya, and all the juices that flow out of a fruit are called the zeya, are called the sweat, they're called the that are associated. V'lo kamosha perish b'halachos gedolos. But yet, at the same time, Tosfos highlights that this is not a universal viewpoint. The Baal Hilchos Gedolos, the Bahag, says Dahainu Davka Hasam the Tarula B'maya, that he thinks that it's only where it is soaked in water that it would result in a shahakol. Aval Diyav min tamre mivarach ala borei priya. But he would think that actually, if it's the juices that flow out, then it should be borei priya. Dehaka amar mar barabashi dezeya ba'almahu va'yotzim min aperos karizeya. But I don't think that's right. Is Tosfos is saying? I believe that actually what flows out of the fruit is considered zeya, and therefore is shackle. This again is we every time we have a glass of fruit juice, this is the basis of deciding to say that we say shahakol niya bivaro rather than anything else. So that I thought that was sufficiently important. If we didn't cover it, that's something worth pausing about. So acherim omer. So that's
except for juice that comes out of grapes.
Right. Fair point. Obviously, juice that comes out of grapes is considered wine or grape juice, and we're going to deal with that very shortly. But you're absolutely right, 100%. And indeed, the Bahag would say that the point of the of when it says Echad Shimrei Yayin, that actually that shows that we're all talking about water, and therefore thinks that these other ones are dealing with water, and therefore actually when you have the pure essence of the fruit, you would not make a shahakol, but rather you would make a ha'etz or potentially a mazonos, I guess, out of barley, although I don't think that there's any liquid. I don't know if there's any liquid in barley, so I don't know that one really is that relevant. But okay. Anyway, that is the position of the Tanakama in this brisa. Acherim omrim, the Cherim say, shmarim sheyesh behem tam yayin. If the water that results has a taste of wine, mevarach alehem borei priya gafen. Well, then you make a borei priya gafen on it. Rabba v'Rav Yosef to Amri Tarvayu ein halacha kacherim. And Rabba and Rav Yosef both agree that the halacha is not like the acherim. The halacha is like the Tanakama, like the rabbis. All right, so that's the bottom line. So Amar Rabba Dekuli Alma Rama Tla. But 1 second. Rabba says that you know what? It depends. You have to understand the situation. Dekuli Alma Rama Tlasa Ba'asa Arba Chamrahu. On the other hand, if I were to now, again, I told you to imagine a lot of grape
in a sieve,
byproduct in a sieve or in a strainer, and now you're pouring water on it. If you pour 3 cups of water on those grapes, and out of that grapes from which wine was made, out of that comes 4 cups of product, right, of gravy of the product. Well, then everybody agrees that that's wine. Because as a reminder, the wine in their days was extraordinarily concentrated. And so as a result, the idea that you would have a ratio of 3 cups of water to 1 cup of wine made total sense to them. And therefore, it's a good product, and it's considered like wine. And Rava l'taimei, and Rava follows his reasoning. To Amar Rava kol chamra delo dari chad al chad plus maya lav chamrahu. Because from his perspective, if you don't have 3 parts of water to 1 part wine, you are not going to have good wine. So Rama tlasa, 1 second. Do you need actually to? I'm sorry, Rama tlasa the v'asa tlasa. On the other hand, if you have 3 cups of water and you pour out and it ends up with 3 cups of drink, v'lo klumhu. Well, then everybody agrees that it's all, no, it's just 3 cups of water that you poured in the top and 3 cups of liquid that you have in the bottom. All of it is considered water because you poured in 3 at the top and you got 3 at the end. Right. So that everybody would agree that it would be shahakol.
If you pour in the 3 cups and 4 come out,
yes,
it's only the 4th cup considered wine, or the whole 4 cups considered wine?
Good question. So we're dealing with a mixture. So yes, the whole 4 cups together would be considered wine. Okay, it's that whole mixture, the mixture of 1 cup of pure wine with 3 cups of water. That is, according to Rava, the ideal ratio of dense wine to make it something that's drinkable, and that drink is considered wine, what we would call wine, and therefore the blessing is borei priya gafen. So, but if you pour 3 and you get 3, below klumhu, then it's not anything. So that everybody agrees that it's not wine, and you'd also only make a shackle. Ki pligi, where do they argue? This is again Rava detailing the machlokus. Derama tlasa va'asa tlasa upalga. What happens if you pour 3 and 3.5 come out? Okay, so now Dirabanan Savre, the rabbis think, the Tanakama thinks tlasa ayil tlasa nafik, that you got really, you can't, you poured in 3,
You got 3.5.
and you got 3.5. Well, the 3 that you poured in all came out.
Right.
So there is definitely 3 out of the 3.5 is water. And pashle palga, and the half is wine. And the problem is upalga bashita palga maya lo velo klumhu. If you have 1 cup of wine, 1/2 a cup of wine with 3 full cups, it's 1/2 to 6 halves, and that ratio is not considered wine. It's too weak to be wine. And the others think, no, tlasa ul trainu palga nafik. When you pour 3 in and you end up with 3.5, actually what has happened is 1/2 cup of the water has stayed in with the grapes, and out of the grapes has come a full cup of wine. So when you poured in 3 cups, now out of the bottom comes 2.5 cups of water and 1 cup of wine. So as a result, tlasa ul terenu palga nafik. You poured in 3, but 2.5 came out. Pashle kuza, and then you have a full cup of from the leftover grapes. V'kuza betreu palga, and when you have 1 cup out of the 2.5 cups, well then chamer ma'al yehu. That's good wine. So again, that's the machlokus. And so actually what the machlokus between, as Rava explains, between the rabbis and the acherim is in this one case, is in the case where more has come out. Now, the Gemara is now going to ask on that. Ubiyoser mikadei midas.
But there are 3.5 come out. And it's one mixture of 3.5. We're saying that out of that 3.5, 2.5 is water and 1 is wine, but we can't separate that. It's one.
Correct. We cannot separate that. This is both of them effectively guessing on the physics.
So therefore, we're just saying because 3.5 come out, according to Acherim, I guess.
Yes,
then there is enough, since 1 of that mixture is really the wine from the grapes that were seeped in that water, it's enough to consider it wine.
Exactly.
The whole mixture. You drink anything from that mixture, it's considered wine.
Exactly. 100%. You got it 100%. So now the Gemara is going to ask, Uviyoser mikidei midaso mi pligi. Well, 1 second. Do they really argue that actually if anything extra comes out, maybe we should say that they argue even in that situation? V'hatanan, because listen to the following Mishnah. This is a Mishnah. Where is this Mishnah from? This Mishnah is from Maisros, and so obviously it's going to be talking about Meiser. Hamitamed, if you soak your water in with this leftover wine product, v'nasan mayim b'mida, and you pour some water through it, v'umatza kedei midaso, and you find the exact same amount of water that came put out, putter. You don't have to give any meiser. So if you have some grape mixture that you have in the sieve, and you pour water in, and the same amount of that you pour in, you get out, even though you never took trumas and maestros on this leftover junk, you don't have anything more to do because we treat it as if it was all water. However, Pater, Rabbi Yehuda Mechayev, but Rabbi Yehuda says that you're chayev. Namely, you're chayev because we assume that some of the water got stuck and some came out. And so as a result, now we have to, and we don't know how much, so we're going to treat it as if it's subject to meiser. So what's the implication? the implication is that the machlokus between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanakama, Rabbanan, and the Rabbi Yehuda, is that only when it comes out with the right measurement. But maybe you would say that if more came out, then everybody would agree that you are obligated in Meiser. So doesn't that show that therefore, in our case, Rava can't be right? Because Rava said that if more comes out, as long as it's not a full cup, it's not considered wine. So doesn't that show that they should not argue that Rava would, because then we would have nobody in our Mishnah here that would agree with the rabbis. So no, no, really, actually, they would argue even in a case where there was more that came out from the bottom. And why does that Mishnah in Meiser tell us only about the halachot when it comes out when the amount of water that comes through, the amount of liquid that comes through is exactly equal to the amount of water that you put in. Lo diacha kocho de Rabbi Yehuda. It's to show how powerful Rabbi Yehuda's statement is. That Rabbi Yehuda would say that even though nothing extra came out, we are going to treat some of what came out as if it was subject to Meiser. So by Minei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak me Rav Chia bar Avin. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak asks, Shmarim sheyesh behem tam yayin mahu. If you have the leftover water, that water that came through, and it has the taste of wine, what's the halacha? Now the Rashbam points out Shmarim sheyesh behem tam yayin. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines down in the narrow lines of the Rashbam on Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph. Lebirkas hayayin. What's the halakha in terms of do you make a bracha of wine on it? Ubraisa lo hava shmiya. He didn't know this brisa, the brisa that we saw that at the beginning of today that we just cited, right? The brisa that says that that echad shimrei yayin. You don't make a bracha. You make shahakol niyeh b'varo. He didn't have that bracha.
Who didn't have that
brisa? What?
Who did not have the brisa?
The Rav Nachman, who was asking this question to Rav Chia bar Avin. So he didn't have this brisa. So lo hava shmiyale. He had never heard this brisa. Dei hava shmiyale, because if he had heard it, hacha haki havale lememar halacha ka'acherim o ein halacha ka'acherim. He would instead have asked, is the halacha like the acherim or is it not like the acherim? Because the acherim, remember, in that brisa say you make a brei priya gafen, and it was the Tanakama who said no, you don't make a brei priya gafen. So Amar Leis, Rav Chia explained, misvarat chamrahu, you think it's considered wine? Kiyua ba'almahu, it's just a some kind of a flavored liquid, and so as a result, it is not considered wine, and we are not going to treat it as such. So Tanu Rabbanan Shmarim Shel Truma. Okay, so now we're in some ways changing the topic.
So what is the beverage here that we don't consider wine? A third? Is it a half comes a quarter comes out? In a full amount, 3.5 come out?
Yeah,
what are we talking
100%. Let's go. So the bottom line is that it would seem like Rava's description is accurate. We tried to challenge it. We were unsuccessful. And so as a result, the situation is the following. If in fact you end up with a ratio with more liquid in the bottom than you started, and you have 1/3, 33% more, meaning 1/4 of the final mixture did not get poured in from above, but seems to have come out of the wine, out of the leftover grapes, then you're going to make a hagafen. If any other situation, anything less than that, you do not make a borei priya gafen. So even if there's a little bit of extra stuff, we're not going to make a borei priya gafen. We're not going to assume that anything got stuck in there. And so as a result, you are going to make a shahakol niyeh bidvaro. That is the halacha. That is, I believe that's in fact how we hold. And of course, as a result, by the way, this is relevant that if in fact you go somewhere and you see, modern, a lot of water pitchers now have place where you put fruit in, and then you pour water, and the fruit is supposed to like give taste to the water, right? So you have like cucumbers,
Right.
or melons, etc. And so the question is,
Fruit-flavored water.
fruit flavored water. All of those situations, not a question you would definitely seem to make a shahakal. So
this is the 3.5, right? He's saying you pour it in 3. And you
anything
get
less
3.
than 4 would be, I think Rava would say, but 3.5 for sure. Yes, that was the way he phrased it. But it seems like anything less than 4, he would say that the rabbis would say shahakol, and that's how we paskin, because we don't
anything
like
less than 4, but 3.5 would be. Oh, that was the machlokas at 3.5.
Correct. 3.5 is the machlokas. 4, everybody agrees that it would be you'd be chayiv. And so my understanding is that 3.5 is not meant to be precise, but rather 3 and some proportion that's less than 1. That all would be considered the subject of the machlokas. And again, we paskin not like the achirim, we paskin like the Tanakama. So we do shahakol. All right, let's keep going, because I don't want to run out of time, because there are a lot of cool issues that we're going to be talking about. So Tana Rabbanan, Shemarim Shel Teruma. If we have this, if in fact these grapes were given to a kohen as truma, and now it has he's made wine with it, and he's got it hanging out, and now the question is, he pours water over it. Is it considered? What comes out? Is it considered truma or not? So Rishon v'Sheni, the first 2 pours out of through the lees, through the leftover grapes, that is going to be treated as truma, and therefore a non-kohen's not allowed to drink it. V'aser. That's why it's prohibited. Shlishi mutter, but the third pour we're going to treat as permitted. Now again, this is different from cups. This is the pours through it, and so it's just important to recognize. Reb Meir Omer, no. Reb Meir says av shlishi b'nosein tam. If the third one, there's still a taste, it's going to be prohibited, meaning that we follow the question of taste. The shel meiser. What about if it was meiser? And here we're talking about meiser sheni that needs to be brought up to Yerushalayim. Rishon aser. The first cup is considered forbidden, meaning that you need to take it to Yerushalayim. Sheni mutter. But the second cup would be okay. And Rabbi Meir says here as well, av sheni b'nosein tam. Here too, if the second cup gives some taste, it's going to be required to bring it to Yerushalayim. The shel hektish, and when it comes to hektish, shlishi aser, even the third pour is going to be prohibited. Uravi mutter, and only the fourth pour is going to be okay. Reb Meir Omer af rivi b'nosein tam. Again, Reb Meir says even the fourth pour is going to be prohibited if any taste is given. Okay, so now Urminhu, 1 second, I have another brisa that seems to contradict this brisa, at least when it comes to hektish, because shel hektish, if you have this lees that's poured over, that is from hektish, and you pour water through it, la'olam asur, it's always prohibited. It doesn't make a difference whether there's any nosein tam, and how many pours it's happened. The shel meiser, la'olam mutter, and when it comes to meiser sheni, it's always permitted. So kasha hektish a hektish, and kasha meiser a meiser seems to have double sets of questions. That's inconsistent with respect to hektish, and it's inconsistent with respect to meiser, because when it came to hektish, we said only the third cup was prohibited, and the fourth cup was okay. And even according to Reb Meir, the fourth cup was prohibited, but after that it would be permitted. And here we're saying that everything's prohibited. And when it came to Meiser Sheni, we said that the first cup is prohibited, meaning you need to bring it to Yerushalayim, and everything after that was okay. And according to Reb Meir, the second cup also, if there was no Saint Tom, would be prohibited and need to be brought to Yerushalayim, but everything after that would be okay. And here we're saying that everything's okay. So we have two questions. So hektish a hektish lo kasha, we can explain the hektish ruling. Kan b'kedushas haguf, kan b'kedushas damim. Well, one case we're dealing with the grapes that were consecrated for the altar. And as a result, because they were consecrated for the altar, so therefore, that's why they're going to be always forbidden. And that was the brisa that we cited second. And kan b'kedusha's damim. But when we cited the first brisa, that was talking about where the grapes were consecrated for their value. Now, how in the world could you consecrate the grapes for the value? Because don't we say that in fact, when you have something that could be for the Beis Hamikdash, then it would be okay. And so the bottom line is that we need to say that either the wine or the grapes themselves was not fit for the base for the altar. And so as a result, that's why you could dedicate and be mikadesh and sanctify the value of these grapes, of this lees, of this leftover grapes mixture. That's why you could consecrate it for the value. But in any event, so that's how we explain that in one case you can it's not always prohibited, and in the other case it's always prohibited. When it's always prohibited, it's when it was dedicated for the Beis Hamikdash's altar directly. So Meiser Nami Lo Kasha. And we can also resolve the question with respect to Meiser Sheni. Kan Meiser Vadai, Kan Meiser Demai. One case is we're dealing with where it's Meiser, we know that it's Meiser Sheni, and so as a result, your first pour has got to be eaten in Yerushalayim, and according to Rebbe Meir, even your second pour if there's taste. And Meiser Demai, and when it's Demai, then even your first pour is going to be permitted because it's essentially a suffix derabanan, and we can say suffix derabanan lahakel, and we can be lenient when it comes to an uncertainty with respect to rabbinic issues. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehud Sadak Kederech she'amru le'inyan isurin kach amru le'inyan haksherin. When it comes to these kinds of principles, where we're talking about whether something is considered wine or water, that when it comes to just as we deal with them with respect to prohibitions, it's so too we're going to deal with them when it comes to something making something capable of becoming tameh. That again, as a reminder, for let's say cucumbers that grew in the ground and you pull them out of the ground, and in order for them to be potentially capable of becoming tameh, they need to touch a liquid. Only then can they become capable of becoming tameh. And it has to be one of 7 kinds of liquids. And in addition, when it comes to water and possibly other liquids, you have to have intention to want it for it to want the water for it to become problematic. So if you didn't want the water to touch it and you weren't looking for that water at all, so then it doesn't work. But now the question is Hechsher and Demai, what kind of mixture, what kind of situation is it that is going to cause something to be capable of becoming tameh? Because Demaya Akshuri Makshare, Dechamra Akshuri Makshare, both wine and water are capable of making something tameh, of making something capable of becoming tameh. So why would it make a difference between whether it's wine or water? So los tzricha shetimdu b'mei geshamim. The situation is where there was rainwater that went through the grape product, and so that's the situation. And there's a machlokas between Tosos and the Rashbam. The Rashbam says that. Let's take a look. Lo tzricha, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines in the middle of the wide lines, not the widest lines, but the mid-wide lines towards the bottom of the Rashbam. Kolomer lo nafgalan mina ella shetamdu leahi de truma umaiser b'mei geshamim. That when the truma or meiser was soaked through rainwater, titzrichi machshava, you need to have some kind of intention for that rainwater to have made the lees capable of becoming tameh. Well, if you consider it wine, so then it's going to cause something, the produce at the bottom is going to cause things to become capable of becoming tameh. Below machshava, but without thinking, Dibimayim hu diksiv v'chi yutain mayim, right? There's a pasuk in Dvarim that tells us that when water is put, and we learn yutain, but it's yud Taf Nun is the way it's spelled in the Torah. That also could be pronounced yitain. And so as a result, we say that the only time that water can make something, according to Rashbam, that water can make something capable of becoming tameh is if it touched water in the way where it's like you affirmatively caused the water to be touched, meaning that you wanted it to happen. So you don't have to actually do it with your hands. But if you take that cucumber outside and you say, Hashem, I want it to rain on this cucumber so this cucumber gets washed, and then the rain comes, then that cucumber is capable of becoming tameh. But if you left it out there by accident and rainwater came on it and you didn't, then it does not become tameh. So mayim. So my yitain denichale af the ma yitain denichale af yutan denichale. So just as when you affirmatively touch something, it's because you wanted it to be touched. So too, when we're talking about yutain, it needs to be something that you wanted to have happen. Uparchinan v'kevan dishavchinhu hi gabra. And now we're going to ask a question. Actually, let's pause. We will stop there in the Rashbam, because now the Gemara is going to ask the question, and the Rashbam is just explaining that question. But now let's go over to Tosos, because Tosos has a real problem with what we just said. According to the Rashbam, the requirement for a thought to have it wanting the water to touch the food product is something that you have only with respect to water, but not with respect to wine. Tosos says, no, that's not true. Any kind of liquid, you need that. So Tema, Dahaka Mashma, Sheyesh Chiluk ben Geshamim, Lashar Mashkim. That seems to be that there's some kind of difference between rainwater and other liquids. Ve'eza Chiluk Yachol Liyot Beinayim. But what kind of difference can you make? Umasha Perish Rabbeinu Shmuel, and that what Rashbam explains, Devamayim Be'inan Denichale, that you need it to want to have it a touch. Below bishar mashkin, and not when it comes to other liquids, could go yayin. Afil lo nichale maksher demayim ksiv v'chiyutein mayim al zera ve'ein nira l'rashba. So again, he explains what Rashbam says, that it's talking about a situation where you want the water to touch, but when it comes to wine, it doesn't make a difference what you want, because the lo ashkach b'shum duchta, according to the Rashba, we don't find anywhere sheyahei chashivus b'yayin min b'mayim, that there's some difference between wine and water l'inyan hechsher when it comes to making something capable of becoming tamei. Uma asher yavo alav mayim mavkinan hechsher l'kol mashkin. And the lesson that Rashbam highlights of Yutain and Yitain applies to all liquids, not just water. Perakama de psachim ika delo muki v'kol mashke asher yishteh b'kol kli le'inyan hechsher. That in fact, not every liquid is considered something that can be capable of becoming causing something to be capable of becoming tamei. Beim came manale delo beinan denichale, and so it seems like you don't need when it comes to that you want it venira lari to be gasham, and therefore when it comes to wine, let's take so therefore the re explains to be gashamim beinan tarti. You need two concepts. Sheyakshiv oto mitchila shehu mashkin, va'achar kach beinan denichale. You need to say that you want something to actually be considered a liquid, and you want it to touch. So there are two concepts. Aval shar. So when it comes to rainwater, you need both. Aval shar mashkin. When it comes to other liquids, kagon mayim, v'yayin, v'shemen, etc. Kevan denicha memela, where it's natural that you already want it in its current form. So therefore, it's already considered a liquid. Hein makshirin afilu lo yakshivotan liyot mashke. So even though you don't have a separate thought that you want it to be a liquid, you want it to be considered a drink, so therefore we're going to say. So therefore, Tosos is saying it's not based on whether you wanted it, because everything has to be that you want it, but rather it's did you want this rainwater to be something drinkable? And if you wanted that, that would be a situation. And so the situation where we say that we're distinguishing between rainwater and wine is in a situation where you didn't want it. You didn't want it to be drinkable. But now the Gemara asks, the Kevan de Kashakel Varami Lahu Lamana Akshavinhu. But 1 second, and this works again according to both Tosos and Rashbam. You can, align it each way. If you already thought, as we turn back into the Gemara, we are about 8 lines up in the.
So the Rashbam doesn't care if it's drinkable?
No, everybody's. The question is, do you want it to be drinkable? That's what Tosos is requiring.
But the Rashbam apparently, it's whether he has a thought, right? The machshava.
The machshava, that according to the Rashbam, is did you want it to touch? That's
it doesn't have to be drinkable.
It does. It does. Well, I mean, we're obviously talking about. Yes, I mean, I don't know whether acidic rainwater or something like that might not be. I'm not up to all the details of liquids that are hechsher l'mekabel tuma, so I can't tell you for sure. But the bottom line is that he's definitely talking about where it is drinkable. And so, but the point is
saying he just wants it to touch. That's
he just wants it to touch, exactly.
But then Tosfos goes further and says,
Tosfos is saying, I want it to be rainwater for drinking. I want this to drink. And so, and now in either way, clearly there's a machshava that's involved. So the point is that, but here, when it came to Tuma, this is the third pouring. So how can it, when it came to the truma, the situation, we're dealing with multiple pourings. So if you're pouring it, isn't that showing some level of intention? So lo stricha shenitame me'elav. No, we're dealing with a situation where the rainwater came, it was left outside, the leaves were left outside, and it came and it rained on it, and therefore it was steeped in it directly. 1 second, but Kavan did nugget kama, but you ended up taking off the earlier cups. So akshavinhu, doesn't that show that you had intention? So amara papa befarish shosa rishon. No, some animal drank the first cups out, and so as a result, that's how we can end up with this machlokes that of whether or not we're going to treat this as wine or rainwater when it comes to wine or rainwater when it comes to something that's hechsher l'kabel tuma.
But this water was left outside, right? You
right,
didn't have anything to do with it.
Correct. The leaves was left outside, and therefore the rain came on it, and therefore the question is according to Rashi, did the person have intention for the water to pass through the leaves and become the liquid? And therefore, if he did, then that liquid at the bottom that now touches the cucumber is going to be make the cucumber capable of becoming tameh. And if he didn't, then if the water ratio is such that it's considered water, then it won't make it capable of becoming tummy. But if there's so much leaves that passes through that it is considered wine, well, then now it would make it capable of becoming tummy. Okay, so Amar Zutra Bartuvia Amarav.
But this is the third pouring, right? Wait,
yes, exactly. The third pouring, because what we have to say
it's a third rainstorm. Are we saying it?
Exactly, third rainstorm. That's exactly what you have to say. Amarav Zutra Bartuvia Amarav. Ein omrim kiddush hayom ela al hayayin haroy lenusach al gabi hamizbeach. That when it comes to saying kiddush on Shabbos, we should make kiddush only on wine that's fit to be on the altar. Now, clearly, this seems like most likely it's referring to the wine that we have at night, because that is when the mitzvah of kiddush is doraisa as opposed to during the day. But there is debate about that issue. Now, what are you trying to exclude here? If you're trying to say that wine right out of the press, meaning grape juice, cannot be used. 1 second, Vahatane Rabbi Chia taught in a brisa, yayin megito lo yavi. You should not use wine from that's right out of the press, meaning grape juice, as the wine for the altar, but im heavy kosher. But if you did use it, well, then it's okay, it's kosher. But kevan to im heavy kosher, when it comes to our kiddush, you should be able to use grape juice. And this is the basis. This Gemara right here is the basis for using grape juice for kiddush. Okay, and an interesting Tosos here that deals with yayin mevushal. And the bottom line is that Tosos says yayin mevushal is okay for making borei priya guffin, and of course that is certainly how we paskin. All right, although there are probably some that are strict about it, but you can use yayin mevushal, and that's the bottom Tosos on Tzadik Vav Amud Bet, but we don't Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph, but we don't have the time to go through it, so I'm just going to leave that for you just with the details. So the Amar Rava,
there might be a point at which the wine or grape juice is diluted such that it's no longer considered roi to levarech borei priya guffin.
Yes, 100%. Certainly, there's a point at which the something could be diluted. But we're not dealing with that. The question is right now what, on a pure level, what can be used for borei priya guffin, and we have this statement that it has to be fit for the altar. And now, what is that coming to exclude? So let's take a look. To Amarava. So now the question is, of course we should be able to use this grape juice, and indeed, the Amarava sochit adam eshkol shel anavim va'omer lav kiddush hayom. You can squeeze grapes and make kiddush. Now, I will note you should not actually do this on Shabbos itself. You can squeeze the grapes on Friday, but if you squeeze them on Shabbos, you're not allowed to squeeze fruit in order to produce liquid. Now, there is one exception where you can squeeze a lemon onto food, if you go on Shabbos. So that's just as a note, but in general, to create a drink, that's going to be prohibited. Okay. And indeed, let's take a look at the Rashbam. Top Rashbam on Tzadik Zayin Amud Bet, as we've turned now to Tzadik Zayin Amud Bet. V'amar Rav sochet adam kolomar ve'im ta'aleh al datcha ledumuyei kiddush l'nisach u'lemeimer delechatchila ein mekachin alav. And you say that therefore l'chatchila you shouldn't do it. Ha'amar Rava sochet adam Achulu alma de mekachin alav l'chatchila. Rava makes it very clear that you can use grape juice even l'chatchila. The el ala me'ute mipia mushulah. So maybe we're going to say that we're talking about taking out from the top or the bottom of the barrel, because maybe that's not as good product. Tani Rabbi Chia mipia u'mishulah lo yavi. You shouldn't use the wine from the top of the barrel or the bottom of the barrel in order to pour it on the altar. Being heavy kosher, but if you do, it is considered kosher. So that doesn't work either. The el maute yayin kushi borek hiliston shel martef shel tzimukin. And so maybe we're going to say that we're referring to excluding either black wine or white wine or hiliston, which notes here is a very weak sweet wine. So maybe Moscato d'Asti might be Shel Martef, or from a cellar, meaning without checking whether or not it is a good or not. Shel Tzimukim, or raisin wine. V'hatanya b'chulan lo yavi. That all of these you shouldn't do on the altar, but if you may be kosher, but if you did do it, it is still kosher. So all of these, therefore, are fit for kiddush. The el mu'ute yain koses. We're dealing with souring wine, mazug, mixed wine, where it's too thin, based on, and this is touching on the point that Ken just raised. Megula, or where it's uncovered. Vilshal shemarim, or wine that is based on the leaves, which is the why that we brought this whole topic here. Vishirecho ra, or if it has a bad smell. Detanya, bikulan lo yavi. All of these you shouldn't bring. V'im heavy puzzle, and if you brought any of them, then it's invalid. So lemute mai. Now, which one of these did Rav intend to exclude? Because if you want to tell me that he's excluding souring wine, Plukta the Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. There's a machlokes on that we saw, I think yesterday, maybe it was 2 days ago, about whether you make a Borei Priya on that, whether it's considered wine or not. And in that situation, so there's some people who say that's not even wine. So of course you can't use that. And if you're going to tell me that it's talking about a mixture, well then most mixtures are improved. And so as a result, therefore, again, this is dealing with their wines, which were very concentrated. And so they needed to be mixed in order to be drunk. Then, so that you are making it better. So as a result, of course you do that. And of course, at the same time, there's a ratio of too much water that now it won't be good and it won't be valid. But at the moment we're dealing with where you can still taste the wine that's in there. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, Modem Kulchamin Rabbi Eliezer, because Shal Bracha She'ein Mevarchen Alav Ad Sheyitin L'Tochel Mayim. That in fact, when it comes to making a bracha, making the doing a benching over a wine, you need to have water in it in order to dilute the taste. So of course it can't be to exclude mixed wine. So Ilam Ute Megula. Now 1 second. So maybe it's talking about to exclude uncovered wine.
But snakes. The snakes. That's
exactly. You can't have uncovered wine. If you've left a wine out uncovered for more than, for 24 hours, then or overnight. So then it's considered dangerous to drink because we're worried that a snake may have left some of its venom in it. And so as a result, it can't be to exclude that because that's not safe to drink. And if you want to tell me he's excluding the wine produced from the lees, Heikidami, what's the situation? If you had poured 3 cups and 4 cups came out, Chamar Ma'al, well, that's perfectly good wine. Everybody agrees that should be good. And if you say that something less came out, where 3.5 came out, that's the machlokas between the rabbis and the acherim. So and so therefore he doesn't need to teach us it because we know we paskin like the Rabbanan, and therefore it's going to be not a valid cup of wine. So must be that it has a bad odor. The ibayas ema laolam lamuti megula, or you could say, you know what? It's talking about where it was left uncovered, but afal gav the avre b'misanenes, and it's where you passed it through a strainer. So as a result, because you pass it through a strainer, you assume that any of the poison got strained out, and therefore it would be okay. Rabbi Nechemia, like Rabbi Nechemia, who says that the venom in wine can be extracted through straining. Nonetheless, you shouldn't use that for to make a bracha on, because hakrivehu na lefecha secha, because if you offer it, if you please, to your governor, hayirtzecha o hayisafanecha, that this pasuk in Malachi, and he's going to show favor, or he's going to turn, or will he turn his countenance toward you? Meaning, is this something nice or not that you're going to now give as a gift used towards a mitzvah? And if it's not something nice that you're not going to do, then you shouldn't use it. And so as a result, just as you wouldn't want to give that as a gift to a human ruler, you shouldn't use it for the mitzvah. Okay, so by Minei Rav Kahana, Chamua de Rav Mesharshia, Mirava. So Rav Kahana asks of Rava, Chamar Chavaryan Mahu. When it comes to white wine, what's the halacha? Now, again, here the Rashbam says, Chamar Chavaryan Mahu, Linefsachim, when it comes to using it in the Beis Hamikdash. V'yesh mefarshim lekiddush v'lo nehira. Some people say that it's referring to kiddush, but the Rashbam doesn't think that is the appropriate way to understand it. And it's worth noting that it must be, and let's take a look at the next one. Chamar Chivaryan, Nira be'enai dahainu yayin borik. That this Chamar Chivaryan is white wine. The Tanya Leil lo yovi ve'im hevi kasher, that we learned about earlier, where we said you shouldn't bring it lechatchila on the altar, but if you did, it's kosher. Ubraisa lo shmiele, and it must be that Rav Kahana had not heard this brisa. So what was the response? So Amar Le, Rava responded to him, because Rava was his father-in-law. He was the father. I'm sorry. Rava respond, not Rav Kahana was the father-in-law of Rav Mesharshia. And Rava responded to him, Al teira yayin ki yis adam. Don't set your sight on wine that is red. Meaning, I'll take a look at this is referring to drinking. Ki yit adam shemishaker yoter midai. That because it causes red wine, it causes one to become more intoxicated. Alma yayin adom kodem linisachim. That shows that red wine is better when it comes to nisachim. The sheikhar kasivahu, because it is written. The word sheikhar for shikurim for being for getting drunk is written in connection with it, and so as a result, the bottom line is that red wine is the preferred wine for using on the mizbeach on the Beis Hamikdash, but white wine is absolutely okay also. Okay, so last bit, kankanim b'sharon. We said that when it came to the kegs that were purchased in Sharon,
The fact that a person becomes more drunk on red wine makes it a better wine for the mizbeach.
Correct, because the term sheikhar is used in connection with the mizbeach, and so as a result, we want wine that is more capable of causing somebody to become not intoxicated in order to for the wine. So that's considered the preferred beverage on the Beis Hamikdash.
It's a little strange because we do say that the Kohanim cannot perform Birkat Kohanim if they're drunk.
Correct. Well, of course, this wine is not for them to drink. This wine is for them to pour on the mizbeach. They weren't supposed to drink this wine either. So all of this is only for the mizbeach. So you're absolutely right. And indeed, it's interesting. You can actually suggest that maybe there's part of the reason that they shouldn't be drunk is because if they're drunk, then it's highlighting that they use something that is appropriate for the Beis Hamikdash, for the Mizbeach. And so maybe that's exactly why, one of the reasons that you would say that they shouldn't be drunk. So let alone, of course, the fact that they shouldn't be drunk because they might not do the right thing. But okay, so the last little bit. So now this takes us all the way back to our Mishnah, which we learned last week. And this Mishnah said at the very end, kan kanim b'Sharon, that when it comes to kegs in Sharon, that if you're willing to accept 10 inferior ones for every 100. Now, here we're talking about the kegs themselves. That was not clear at the time when we learned this, what this was referring to. But the point is that the kegs themselves matter. So, but what does it mean to be an inferior keg, an inferior container? So, Tana, we learned in a brisa, pitasot, when it comes to these bad kegs, naos umeguparot. They still need to be attractive, and meguparot is sealed with sulfur. And let's take a look in the Rashbam. Tana pitasot, de amran de mekablan eser lekuf. We said that you're going to have to accept 10 inferior kankanim in Sharon for every 100. Eina shvuros. We're not talking about broken, v'reuos mamish, that are really ruined. That you don't need to accept. De'im kain afilu achas lo mekabel. Even one that's actually broken, you don't need to accept. Ela naot kishar kederot. But if it's nice, like a typical keg, Sheba Sharon, Umugufrot, Begafrit, and it is, sulfurized. Vehagafrit sotim es hashaver, because the sulfur closed up the crack. Umechabro kitzat, and therefore it is now healed a little bit. V'yachol lehishtamesh behem kitzat, and you can use it for short periods of time. Ella she'ein miskayim zman meruba, but you don't use it for a long time because then it'll break. Kishlamin, like a whole one, that you can't do. V'hoel v'lo hava shvurin, but since it's not actually broken legamri completely, mekabel alav yud lekaf kuf. So you need to accept 10 out of every 100. Uperish kasav b'sfarim, and the explanation was written in the Sfarim. The following interpretation was written, meaning, and this is a reference to a Tosefta. I'm sorry, no, that's the next. I'm sorry. Kishabala bashlan, maybe gafrit, that when you come to to cook to prepare it, you should bring the keg. You should bring this sulfur, v'nozin behen ha'or, and light it on fire. Umelachat ton ha'or im oto gafrit, and as a result, it'll all come together. V'nirot mivushalot v'hein naot, and so it'll actually look nicer. Maybe it's some kind of glazing. I'm not 100% sure. But in any event, let's do the last Rashbam and Tana Yeser.
What does it mean? Memelachatan ha'or.
Yeah, I think it means, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that it means that it somehow
seals it.
Yeah, seals it. Some kind of covering that it, a coating. But it must be that this is the fire. It's describing what the fire does to the sulfur. I'm not sure about the physics associated with it, but it's clear that it's referring to some kind of sealant that gets created. And so
it's like that. Is that like in Parshat Balak? The word for the right?
That's a good question. I'll let me look into that and I'll see tomorrow, God willing. Okay, so Tana Yeser al Kain b'kulan maxir et hashar v'nota at adamim mimenu. So the Rabbeinu Hananel offers this following interpretation that when if it were more than 10%, then you return just the extra. So unlike, remember when we had the 1/24th, if you ended up with more than 1/24th, the person could remove all of the soiled product. You didn't just remove the overage, but you could remove all of it. Here, the Rabbeinu Hananel is telling us that you don't get to remove all of it. You just get to go down till you get to 10%. Ubraisa mitzasiya b'tosefta. I found a brisa in the Tosefta. V'yesh lilmod the bisvarim shalahem ksuva v'yalfinan mina ledun kain. And some people, and maybe you can even say that it actually had this language in the Gemara, the hamoser al yud, that if there was more than 10% kosasos potsos that were not good jugs, yachzer, then you could return them. Aval ha'eser hagiyuhu, but the 10 themselves, the 10%, they do get to the customer. Delekalamemer eruve ariv kilagabi tenufta. That it's not something that gets naturally mixed in, like when it comes to the soiled product. Delekalamemer nami aperi shapire yahib. And it's not like the other situation where he says that he's buying really good stuff. The taima detricha lo shayachaki. That the whole concept of spending the effort to try and remove the non-good ones doesn't apply here at all. So the bottom line is that when it comes to the 10% of, if you buy kegs and you get 10% that are not valid, if it turns out that 11 out of the 100 are not valid, you can only trade in one. You don't get to trade in all 11. So we will pick up with the next Mishnah, God willing, tomorrow, and we're going to continue with the halachot associated with selling wine. So again, very interesting, and actually a couple of halachot that are relevant even today.
The Chumash, I'm looking at the Chumash now. It says Yelachachu Hakal Kosvi Kilcho Chashor, that it licks up that's in Parshat Balak. That where the shore licks it up and the shore.
So I think it must mean that it becomes sort of like a liquid that that it licks up the entire outside. That's my basis. That would be how I would interpret it. But Yishakach, thank you for bringing that in. That's a very good catch. That verb is used in Parshas Balak. Shakach. Have a great day.